I just think it's written in such an interesting way. I've never read a book like that. One of the most astonishing and elusive authors of the past 30 years is a writer called Elena Ferrante. Or at least that's the pseudonym that this author uses to write their books. I wanted to start a series on my channel all about the different authors that I really, really love. And of course, at the top of that list, I had to put Elena Ferrante, whose work I absolutely adore and whose fiction I have recently finished reading in its entirety. She's written some non-fiction as well, which I haven't read all of them, but I've just got one left over. So I feel quite comfortable speaking at length about Elena Ferrante's writing at this point because I've just consumed so much of it, and I feel like I've gotten quite a good grip on how she operates as a writer through her non-fiction as well. So I feel like if I'm not an authority, at least I'm a very, very big fan, and I just want more people to read Elena Ferrante's work because I think she's so wonderful at what she does. No one writes like her. No one translates like her fantastic translator, Anne Goldstein, who translates her original Italian into English. I just think the whole Elena Ferrante project is so amazing, and I think that it is one of the hallmarks to me of what is fantastic about literature in the modern day. If you have never seen me before, my name is Cara, and I'm so glad that you're here because I can't wait to tell you about one of my favorite authors. So as you may or may not know, Elena Ferrante has been a pseudonymous name for an Italian writer since the early 90s. No one knows who Elena Ferrante is apart from her editor, I believe. It seems like her thought process behind not revealing her identity is because she feels that as soon as her books become published, they become the readers' books and they no longer belong to her, but they belong to the readers of the world. And she's extremely selective with the works that she publishes. She's said many times in many different interviews and many different articles that she's written or lectures that she's written that she doesn't want to be involved in the book's life beyond her writing desk. She believes that the readers should appreciate and enjoy the book in its own right without interference from the writer. I just think this is such an interesting concept, especially for a writer in the 21st century when so many people rely on social media in order to get word about their work out. Elena Ferrante doesn't need any of that. Her work speaks for itself. She's been nominated for the International Booker Prize. She's been nominated for the Strega Prize, which is one of the most prestigious literary prizes in Italy. Several of her books were marked as some of the best books of the 21st century on a New York Times list that came out last year. So she really doesn't need any of the trappings that come along with a lot of things that we associate with modern day publishing. So for today's video, I wanted to do like a crash course about all of the books that she's published and sort of tell you where you can start, because at this point she's published a lot of books and I think it can be quite overwhelming if you don't know where to start, especially because her books were published over such a long period of time. She started publishing in the early 90s and her most recent book came out in 2020. So there's definitely a lot of scope for you. I think there is an Elena Ferrante book for everyone. So if I'm describing one of these books and it sounds like something that you would enjoy, I think you should read it because her writing is just something else. It takes you on a different sort of journey. The ways in which it deals with the interiority of women's lives, the complexities of relationships that women have with themselves, with the world, with other women, with men, with society, with education. All of those things are all rolled into her books, and I just think no one does it as well as she does. And that is why I have read every single one of her published fiction works, and why I am actually currently rereading her series that she's written. Which brings me to where I want to start today's video, because I think most people know Elena Ferrante probably from her series called the Neapolitan Quartet. Here are my copies of the Neapolitan Quartet. I take very good care of them. I'm currently on the final book in the Neapolitan Quartet, so I've read all the other ones twice by this point. They are absolutely incredible books. They have also been adapted into a fantastic TV show, so if you have read these books, I highly recommend the TV show. It just brought so many other elements of the books to life for me, and now that I'm rereading the book after watching the show, I feel like I can just imagine it so much better now. The Neapolitan quartet follows two friends, Elena and Lila, who grow up in Naples in the 50s and 60s, and it follows them throughout their entire lives as they, get boyfriends, get jobs, get married, get divorced, have their own kids, and then as they age, just into their, middle age and into their old age as well. These are some of the most incredible books that have ever been written. Period. That's not even my opinion. Everyone who has ever reviewed these books says that there is just truly some sort of alchemy in them, something different, something new, something unique that has never truly been seen before. I think the ways in which it talks about female relationships, female friendships, how they evolve over the years, the different ways in which female rage manifests itself as a result of frustration from being barred from certain parts of society, such as being sort of caged by motherhood a lot of the time, because it's not a burden that is shared in parenthood a lot of the time, especially during the time that these characters become mothers. These books also really underscore the importance and privilege of education and how education can be a road to so many wonderful things that can happen in a person's life. I just think that the ways in which these books are so well constructed, so genuine. There's so much depth to the story, to every character. You really feel like you're living in the world while you're reading these books. And all of Elena Ferrante's books take place in Naples, or they have some sort of Neapolitan influence in them. And this one I think is probably the most like that. The city really truly feels like a character in these books. And the ways in which the characters interact with the city, the ways in which the city changes over the years, the ways in which the city informs a lot of their past experiences, how different locations in the city bring up memories from the past. It's just so geniusly written, constructed, expanded upon. I think these are some of the most wonderful books that have ever been written. So if you're unsure where to start with her work, I think these are the most accessible, and I also think they are the most immersive of her works. I started reading Elena Ferrante's books by reading My Brilliant Friend, which is the first book in the Neapolitan quartet, and I was absolutely sucked in. I think I said in my review at the time, which is 4 years ago now, that it felt like listening to Seven, the song by Taylor Swift. It's such a brilliant, brilliant book. I highly recommend starting with that one if you are completely overwhelmed by the amount of fantastic books that Elena Ferrante has published. Then I think I'm going to move on to the first 3 books that she published. So these were all standalone novels, and they all follow a very highly educated woman in her young to middle adulthood, and the different ways in which she deals with life, the ways in which she deals with relationships that she has with her family, with her mother, with her husband, with her children, all these different relationships that women have and that don't really get put into words just because they're so taken for granted. So the very first book that Elena Ferrante published is called Troubling Love, which follows a young Neapolitan woman called Delia, whose mother has suddenly passed away, and she returns to her home city of Naples, and she tries to figure out how this could have happened, that her mother suddenly passed without any notice. The book sort of follows the ways in which Delia is grappling with unfinished business from her childhood and from her relationship with her mother, which had become quite estranged towards the end of her mother's life, or at least the end of the book. And it's so interesting to see how the story unravels. It's very dense. It feels like it's sort of wrapped in many different layers, and every layer that you uncover, you sort of think is going to reveal something new about Delia or about her mother, but it's very unclear whether you're being fooled or being pulled further into the story. It's a very hypnotic book, but it's very, very odd. I think this is the strangest of Elena Ferrante's works, and for me personally, it's my least favourite, but I do think I would appreciate it now more because I've read many of the things that she's said in articles and in correspondence that she's written about this book. I think I would probably have more appreciation for what she was trying to do. But again, this is her debut novel, so it's not going to be the most perfect book ever written because I don't think anyone's debut novel should be like the standard that you set for them. You can have an amazing debut novel, but that doesn't mean anything else can't surpass it. And I think she's pretty much surpassed this one with all her other ones after, for me. There's also a movie adaptation of this book, but I haven't watched it. It's in Italian, and she actually has a lot of correspondence with the director of this movie in one of her other non-fiction books, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. It seems like she's very pleased with that adaptation of the book, though, so I think that's a pretty good sign that it's translated well onto a screen. It's very fascinating to think about the different themes that are unpacked in Troubling Love, because there are a lot of themes surrounding clothing and the role that that plays in women's lives, and the different stories that you can sort of uncover through seeing what clothes someone wore or what clothes someone found important. And I just think that's such a fascinating concept, like the concept of clothing being sort of a key to what a woman's experiences are. I love that. Elena Ferrante unpacks this in such an interesting way as well, and I think it's a very fascinating story that can definitely be very interesting to discuss with a group of people. I think it's maybe not a good book to read completely by yourself, because like, what do you do with all these things that have happened? I think that's really a fertile breeding ground for some discussions as well. Then Elena Ferrante's second book is called The Days of Abandonment. This, I think, is probably my favourite of her books, if not just after the Neapolitan Quartet. This book follows the main character, Olga, who is a woman in her 30s, whose husband has suddenly decided to leave her for a younger woman. And he leaves her right at the start of a summer in Turin with their 2 kids and their dog in this tiny, sweltering apartment. It's such a good setting, and whenever I think of this book, I'm just immediately transported to how Elena Ferrante described this little flat in which all of these things happen. It's kind of like this boiling pot of emotions, but also of the physical heat because it's the middle of summer, but also this intense feeling of abandonment from her husband, but also the fact that because it's summer, everyone's out of the city. So the city is pretty much empty, and it's this sort of ghost town that Olga is living in with her children and dog. And the different ways in which she interacts with her children is so fascinating. The different ways in which she interacts with her daughter and her son is also so interesting. She's sort of like passing the baton of leading the household over to her daughter in many ways. She's like sort of getting her daughter to keep her in check. And it's just so fascinating because she just doesn't trust her son to be able to do it in the same way, to have that same intuition. And she really like struggles with herself when she starts thinking these things. She's like, why do I feel this way? Why can't I just allow things to unfold like of their own accord? I think this is such a good representation of the frustrations that a highly educated woman can feel within the constraints of motherhood or just expectations that society places upon her. And even though she might sometimes want to participate in certain aspects of the society, like she might want to have children, she might want to have a pet dog, these constraints aren't always as easy, and women can't break free of them as easily as men can. Like, she can't just suddenly decide to abandon their children exactly like her husband did, because then their children would have no one. And I just think it is such a genius book. The setting is so perfect for the type of story she's trying to tell. The themes, the elements, the plot, everything just works so well together. It's like watching someone braid the most intricate pattern, and it's so satisfying to read. I think Elena Ferrante's skill of crafting a story with both themes and grounding it in reality is so well on display in this book. So I would highly recommend this book, maybe as the first book that you could read from her work, if you are not looking to read an entire series to get into her work. Is basically what I'm trying to say here. Then, the final book that she wrote before the Neapolitan Quartet is a book called The Lost Daughter. This book follows Lida, who is a middle-aged woman whose daughters have recently moved out of the house. She's divorced from her husband, has been for many years. Her husband has gone to live in Canada, and her daughters are also moving to Canada at the start of the book. And she decides that she wants to go on a short holiday. She works at a university, so she wants to go away just for a couple of weeks just to like sort of reset her brain and get things back to working order. And when she arrives at her holiday destination, she's going to the beach, she sees that there is another family who are also holidaying in the exact same place. And this family includes a young mother with her toddler daughter. And Leah then observes them every single day when she goes to the beach and sees them there as well. And she sort of starts seeing similarities between this mother's relationship with her young daughter and her relationship with her own daughters, and the little fights that these two have with each other, the ways in which this little girl especially plays with her doll, and the ways in which the relationship between this girl and her mother then manifests in the relationship between this girl and her doll. It's so well done. I can't even really explain it. It's very difficult to explain the concept of an Elena Ferrante book because she does such a good job of basically taking your hand and walking you through the entire story, the characters' thought processes, the reasons why they do things, the reasons why they notice certain things as well. And the theme of this doll and this child playing with this doll and this child losing this doll and then finding, it's so well done because it's so representative of, I think, the ways in which women feel about the handle that they have on their lives and the people and the things that they are responsible for. And this particular theme of the doll is then also continued into the Neapolitan quartet, which I just think is so amazing. I love the ways in which you can see the threads of Elena Ferrante's writing throughout all of her books. She's continuously fascinated by the same things, but she inspects them from different angles, which I just think is so amazing. And it's so lovely to see someone who really just wants to guide you through these thought processes and the reasons why she thinks differently about different things at different times. The Lost Daughter, I think, is a very elusive book to read. It's a very tense book, but there's no real resolution for this frustration that builds throughout the book. And I think it's very much intentional. So I definitely not a criticism for the book, but I do think that some people might not like that aspect of it that much. So just be aware of it. While we're on the topic of The Lost Daughter, she also wrote a children's story, which is from the perspective of the doll in the Lost Daughter story, the doll that spends the night on the beach. And it's a very weird children's story. I'll say that straight off the bat. It's royal doll weird children's story. I liked it well enough, but I'm not the target audience for the story, so that was kind of my problem with the story. I have no idea who is the target audience for the story, because it's quite complexly written for a children's story, which I suppose is a pretty good thing. She's trusting that a child would understand what's going on. Beautiful pictures in this book, I will say. Beautiful illustrations, I love them. But it's very complex writing for a children's book. So I do wonder which little precocious tween bitch is gonna read this book. But I mean, go off, I suppose. If that is a person's way into Elena Ferrante's writing, I mean, I'm not gonna judge. I think everyone should read her book, so I think it's a good thing that it exists in the world, because it's definitely going to be for someone. I just don't know who. Then, the last of Elena Ferrante's fiction that has been published currently is a book that she published in 2020 called The Lying Life of Adults. This book is a massive departure from any of her other work in that it is told entirely from the perspective of a teenage girl. All her first standalone books were told from the perspective of a highly educated woman, and the Neapolitan Quartet, though it follows Elena and Lila's relationship from the time that they were children to the time where they are in their senior years, it is all told from the perspective of Elena, who is writing from her current age, in her 60s or 70s. So it's not from a child's perspective, whereas The Lying Life of Adults is entirely from a child's perspective, from a tween to teenage girl's perspective. I love this book. I know a lot of people whose first Elena Ferrante book was this one. I think it probably is a really good entry point for Elena Ferrante's work, because the language isn't as dense as it can be with some of her other books, but it's just as complex, which I think is a pretty good way to gauge whether you're going to get on with her writing or not. So, The Lying Life of Adults is about a girl called Giovanna who lives in Naples with her parents. She's an only child. She has cousins that she plays with often, but she doesn't really have a lot of friends. And she's also extremely intrigued by her father's estranged sister, her aunt, and the reasons that her parents give for why they never see this aunt. And as the story unfolds, Giovanna gets to know this aunt of hers, and she gets other friends, and she starts interacting with more people outside of her immediate, like, domestic bubble. And it's just so fascinating how you can literally feel like the rose-colored glasses of youth being lifted from her eyes. I think the ways in which Elena Ferrante discusses the different ways in which children discover information about the world and about life that their parents might hide from them for good or bad reasons is so well done, because children are extremely perceptive and they can tell when something is unfair. Especially children are very preoccupied with, like, justice, and to say, like, I think the things that you have said about this person are unfair. I think it's unfair that you've hidden all the photographs that has this person inside them. It's so well crafted. It unfolds in such a beautiful way. I just think a child's perspective is such an interesting way in which to play with a story, because you can really bring a lot of different elements of realization and use the child's inexperience with the reader's probable experience to sort of interplay those two different aspects, like sort of make a contrast between those two things. I just think it's written in such an interesting way. I've never read a book like that. Like, all of her books are like that. I've never read anything like them. Even individually, they're extremely different, even though there are some threads connecting them, like, thematically. But I think it's so cool to see how she's written a story from a child's perspective. It's so well done. And because it's, like, really stands out in her works as something that she's never done before, it's really, really interesting to see how she grapples with this child's perspective, this, like, inexperienced, youthful perspective. So those are all the fiction works that Elena Ferrante has written, and I sort of alluded to it. The order in which I would suggest reading them is probably either the Neapolitan Quartet or the Days of Abandonment first, and then pretty much any order that you want to from there on out. Unless something in particular really tickled your fancy and you want to really start with that one, I'm not going to stop you. I think any of her books are brilliant, but I just want to, like, find entry points for people that I think would make them want to read more of her work. So, done with fiction. Regarding Elena Ferrante's non-fiction, she has published 3 non-fiction works. The first one is a volume called frantumaglia, which is a word that was made up by Elena Ferrante's mother, and it's sort of meant to mean, like, fragments or fragmentary. It's like little pieces, bits and pieces of paper, of memories, just different things scattered around the world that all come together in many different ways, kind of like a mosaic. Frantumaglia is a collection of correspondence between Elena Ferrante and her editors and the film director of Troubling Love and a lot of other people with whom she's collaborated with artistically in some sort of way. It also has a lot of different interviews that she's done over the years. All of them are an analogue, which is very handy for a book like this, because obviously, like, she doesn't show up in person to things, only if it's her editor, because her editor already knows who she is. So it's very fascinating to see the different ways in which they try to grapple with the idea of who she is, her anonymity, what's going on, like, why the anonymity for so long, that kind of thing. This book could fall very easily into the trap of being repetitive, but it doesn't, because Elena Ferrante is amazing and she gives different answers in every single interview where she's asked about why she's decided to not put her birth name on her books, which I just think is impossible to do. So I don't know how she did it. I was enthralled throughout the entire process of reading Frantumaglia, but I do think I wouldn't recommend it unless you have read everything up until the Story of the Lost Child, which is the final book in the Neapolitan Quartet, because there are many spoilers for her other books in this particular volume. Similarly, another volume of non-fiction that she published is this one called In the Margins, which is a collection of lectures that were read on her behalf by an Italian actress at a university in Italy. In the Margins goes into a lot of detail about Elena Ferrante's relationship with the writing process, but also with her reading process and the different ways in which different stories have influenced her in her writing career and her creativity in general. It's very fascinating to read if you're already a fan of her work. I would highly recommend it. She goes into a lot of detail about the different ways in which she constructed her different characters, especially in her first 3 novels. This one was published after The Lying Lives of Adults came out, so if you don't want any spoilers for any of her novels, I would recommend reading all of them before getting to this volume. But if you don't care about spoilers, then this is still a fantastic resource to read about a writer's experiences with books and literature outside of her own work and then within her own work and her writing process and how all of that works. I think it's a really, really good selection of lectures. Very fascinating. I really loved reading them. But I don't think they are maybe for someone who's not interested at all in Elena Ferrante's work. So if you're like curious about her work but you haven't read all of her books, maybe this would be good for you. But otherwise, I think there are other resources that you might find more interesting for your particular tastes. Then, the only one of Elena Ferrante's books that I have not yet read is a collection of articles called Incidental Interventions, which is articles that Elena Ferrante published for The Guardian, I think it is, and on a weekly basis for a year. So this is just a collection of all of those articles together. I haven't read any of them, so I have no idea what they're about. So if anyone has read this collection of articles and wants to give more information about that in the comments, that would be fantastic. I'm definitely planning on reading it, but I haven't been able to find a hard copy, and I would really like one because I like underlining her non-fiction a lot. That is everything that Elena Ferrante has published, fiction and non-fiction, and whether I think you should start off your Ferrante journey by reading them. This has been a video that I've wanted to make for so long because I love her writing so dearly, and I just really want to spread the word of her writing. Not that I think she needs like anyone to introduce her, but I just think her work is so special. It's so special to me. I love it so much. I think it's so indicative and informing of my literary taste. So I think that if you watch my channel, then this is a great way in which to maybe connect further with the types of books that I love. And I think if you like the same books that I do and you haven't read these, you would really, really love them too. If you've read all of Elena Ferrante's works, please let me know which is your favourite. If you're planning to read her works after watching this video, please let me know which one you want to pick up first. I'm so excited to hear from all of you because this is just a topic that just makes me so happy. Please let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful. I definitely want to do this for some other authors as well, like Sally Rooney or Ali Smith, whose books I've read a lot of as well. So if you're interested in that, I'm more than happy to make another video like this. Other than that, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I really just appreciate that you want to read more of Elena Ferrante's work or are just interested in continuing the discussion around her fantastic books. That is everything from me for today. I will see you again next week with another video. Take care.